Welcome to the final part of Journey. In this part we're going to be taking on the last two chapters of the game, and as you can see, since we've been inside the caves and the underground sections and whatnot, the entire tone of everything has changed radically now we've come back out the other side. And this adds a bit more credence to what I was talking about in the last video about how the change in colour scheme is pretty much representative of the overall change in the game's tone. Because like them guys who were threatening us before that looked quite locked up, and they looked like they were pretty much sort of trapped in there in their own little designated sections, where we just saw one fly off with no restrictions or nothing like holding him back at all. Like, he's going to be around, we're going to have to worry about him. And the weather here is obviously, as you can see, it's much more intense than anything we had up to this point. Because cold weather, you know, it's a struggle, and especially with this wind. This wind is tied into the game's mechanics as well, because it slows down your walking speed, and unless you're comfortably hidden behind one of these little statues, then you're gonna get blown back. And if you look closely at those little statues, they have that same sort of zigzag design to them that the figures in the little wall murals had. Like, here we are getting blown back, just showing off how that works. But like, that's kind of, it's like the game at this point has told us what's going to happen to us, or at least what we're going to encounter for the rest of it. Because in that little flashback on the murals last time, we saw that there was wind, we saw some of these, and we saw one of the robed figures, one of the travellers, on the ground struggling. And everything about what we saw toward the end of the last chapter, and hell, even the chapter before that, it's entirely indicative of what to expect. So like, you might take it as like the game spoiling itself before we get there, but in a way I did hint at this as well last part, but I kind of think it does the job of making you want to be the exception. We've seen a lot of the travellers in those murals up to this point. We've seen there were the parts where there were lots of them, there were the parts where they were divided, and we saw the part where it was just the one of them and he was struggling. So like, he was the last persistent one. And it makes you wonder, is he us? Is that some kind of preemptive failure thing going on? Or is that a drive for like our target? Like, he was the most successful one so far, so we want to be better than him. We want to overtake him and replace his legacy with our own. And I like that you get that quick little shot of the moon up there as well. It's just kind of something else to add to the character of this scene here. It's kind of ambiguous as to what time of day it even is at this point, given, you know, the intense weather is overshadowing any kind of lighting cues we may have. Although if you take this as being like in the evening, that would represent a sense of progression, because we had the blazing sun in like the first 4 chapters or so. And then once we'd been inside, it was dark, naturally, because it's inside. But then we come out, and now it's just, everything's cold, everything's chilly, and maybe it's a bit later on. And you could take that as being this game being set over the course of a day. But that's not necessarily the case. Like, we haven't seen him stop off for sleep or anything like this. Like, we've seen him meditate, that's about the closest thing to it. But like, that again could be metaphorical. It like could be there was this story that happened, and this game is like condensing that down to show us the most important parts. But there's another little mule that again shows things divided, like as though there's two squads of them, like one on either side. And I think that is meant to be that bridge right there. I think it's possibly showing that maybe in a historical event there were like two sides and there was a reason why they were separated, possibly from the bridge breaking. Or you could even take it something to do with the weather of, like, you know, maybe this scarf thing, this ribbon thing wasn't there beforehand, so they had no way of contacting each other. But I think the colour here is very well done in terms of the just general shading and whatnot, because if you were to sit back from that, you could easily mistake this for being solely that dark blue colour and white and no other colours. Like, it is more detailed than that. There are shadows, there are like subtle lighting effects, but you know, it's so, like, I guess it's the contrast I'm trying to get at. Like, it's very high contrast, and so it kind of emphasises the rawness of this particular part of the journey compared to the very detailed desert area, like sandy desert area from the earlier chapters. Yes, in this section we are going to have to gradually push forward and hide behind things to avoid getting hurt. And because this can take a little while, this is probably a good time for me to just go over the admittedly quite few notes I have about this game's staffing. The director for the game is someone called Genova Chen, and their other credits are other That Game Company games. I think they were involved with like Flower and Flow, those games. The producer, Robin Honeck, her other credits actually aren't That Game Company games. She's also worked on My Sims, which I seem to recall that being like a spin-off from The Sims that had like more blocky kind of characters, and also Boom Blocks, which I think that was a Wii game. I don't know anything about it. And the artists, Matt Nava and Aaron Jesse. Now, I'm not too familiar with much of Aaron Jesse's other work, but Matt Nava is the guy who would go on to, I believe, direct Abzu. Like, he was the one who founded Giant Squid Studios, and that was what led to Abzu, and hopefully more games in the future, because I think they've got a talented team going on there. And obviously I mentioned last time that the composer's Austin Wintory, who also would go on to work on Abzu. Yeah, this segment here, like, I think this is another part where it's taken the fear of this thing that we had, that was sort of ingrained into us in the last part, and just ramping up even more so. And that's because we have this extra degree of vulnerability here. Like, you can see that our maneuverability is restricted here. We're like by the weather, because we're walking slower. And our character, you can kind of see that he's sort of huddled up to himself, shivering a little bit. He's covered in ice. He must be absolutely freezing. And he's trying to push his way through the snow. And so he's much less mobile than he was when he was inside. Like, inside, yeah, he was insignificant compared to them in size, but at least he could move. Whereas now, he's got that extra hardship against him. It's kind of like an extreme situation here. And that's the sort of thing that it's amping up the tension even more so. And it's basically the entirety of the game from here on out. That's what I was trying to get at when I was saying there's certain parts of this game that just feel so intense when you're the one controlling it. Like, I know you can, even just watching this, like right now, just watching this, I'm getting this feeling of like, you know, this is a little bit overwhelming, I've got to push on through. But like, when you're the one who is controlling this guy here, who you're basically feeling all of his struggles, and that is just such a powerful way to get you involved in a game like this. And it's the sort of thing that's where this game's everything really is coming together, because like, if you took out even just one factor of this, it wouldn't be as effective. Like, if the art style right now wasn't so harsh looking, if the control wasn't done this way, if there was like different music playing, it wouldn't have been as effective. It's like a combination of both the presentation and the gameplay coming together to create this incredibly like tight experience that I think everything tries to do, but only a handful of things can pull it off well. And really, that's something that I think is always going to age very well with this game. Like, I think even if we go back to this game, like maybe in 10-15 years time, I think this will be just as effective. Because I'm looking at this here, and there's nothing that I really think will look clunky with age. Because with hyper-realistic games, what we define as realism changes every generation. If you look at games from like maybe 5 or 6 years ago that were the epitome of a realistic looking game at the time, nowadays they look sort of dated. Whereas this originally came out in 2012, so that's 6 years ago, near enough. And it's still incredibly impactful. And I think another 6 years, it will still be so, and the 6 years after that. Listen to that sound direction right now. Music stopped. Now it's picking back up, but we had a few seconds there of just the wind sound. And it's incredibly powerful wind. Like, you just saw the way it was blowing me back just then. Get that at the wrong angle, and you can kind of think that could end up quite nasty. But given we are the Traveller, and it's been foretold in those murals, we are going to keep pushing through this. And this section here can be quite difficult to navigate, and it can be quite difficult to make your way through. But it's done in a way that it's not frustrating, it's done in a way that makes you feel like you're properly having to experience the hardships that your Traveller here is going through himself. And now, this part. I think this is like where everything just clicked together for me in my first playthrough, because I'm pushing my way up. This is the section that was explicitly drawn out for us, purely there in black and white on the mural, of we've got wind blowing towards us, we're getting close to the mountain, we can literally see it in sight, and we've got the intense weather pushing us back. And we saw how it ended up for that character in the mural. We saw that he was fallen down, he was defeated. There's literally nothing he could do to push forward, he was just knocked down on his knees. And the pose that he was in is very much akin to the pose that our Traveller here looks like he's in as he's getting blown down. And so that's what makes it that bit more like putting you on edge when you see him get blown down a bit, and then he lifts himself back up, and then he gets blown back a bit more. And then when you get up to this part here and the music stops, and we're just pushing forward. And we just keep on pushing forward. We're tired, we're cold, we're uncomfortable. And we don't know whether to accept our fate or not. As it was foretold. Yeah, that entire segment there is one of the most emotional parts of any video game I've ever played, purely because of how impactful that struggle was. What's happening here, though? You see, when something is prophesized in the mural, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be something that gets repeated. That doesn't necessarily mean the future is guaranteed or that history will repeat. Because sometimes it just takes one to get over the hurdle that tripped so many before. And sometimes you just need a feeling of catharsis. And yes, this is doing the thing, the satisfying cathartic ending after a huge hardship. I love it when games do this, because this feels like I've earned it. This feels like I've gone through the difficulties I needed, the trials I needed to face to earn this free flight where I can't fall down. I'm not gonna have to worry about anything anymore. I can just keep on flying upward and upward toward the mountain, toward the destination that I originally was heading for. It's like my traveller here, he's done his time. He's earned this freedom of movement. He's earned this right to catharsis. And I know there is a parallel to make here, but I think the way Journey does this has every right to stand on its own too. And so this is just the sort of part that is just so satisfying to kind of wrap up the game. And it's the sort of thing as well that kind of concludes this emotional roller coaster that is Journey. Because we had our introduction, which was the starting off steady, learning the ropes, working out what we're going to be doing, and also identifying the mountain as our goal. Then we had the spectacle along the way, the thing that's going to be a memory forever. And after that, we fell down into the cold, chilly darkness. We were in there for a while. We had our first encounter with danger, the first thing that could truly stop us on this journey if it wanted to. Then, once we've been through that, we have the ultimate challenge, which is the snowy, windy peak in front of the mountain. And once we've done that, Once we've been through everything, once we've proved our worth, we just get this gorgeous, relieving sense of freedom. We're nearly there, folks. We're really nearly there. This is beautiful. To sum up my thoughts on Journey, because we're right near the mountain now, this game is absolutely amazing. It's incredible. It's one of the best games I've played. It's not like my favourite game ever, but the ride that it brought me, like, I'm low on words on to describe how much I absolutely loved my experience with it. It was, like I say, an emotional roller coaster. There was a lot of different feelings it sparked in me that I didn't even realise a game could do, and I think the only game that does this kind of thing better to me, or at least did this kind of thing better to me, was when I first played Abzu. I tried to dance around comparing them as much as I could, but they both do this kind of thing amazingly, and I'm glad I finally played Journey. Now, whether you want to take this as a metaphor for heaven, you know, the heavenly light, or whether you want to just see it as a conclusion, that's very much open to interpretation, much like most of the game. But what it is, and what it cannot be disputed that it is, it's a conclusion to the traveller's journey. But ladies and gentlemen, I've been the Flameclaw, and this has been Journey for the PlayStation 4. I'll see you next time for another playthrough.